House. Welcome back to Recently Seen Reading. I'm Heather. I thought since it's a fairly quiet morning here and the frost has burnt off the rooftops, I would film a little weekly wrap-up. But first, before I get started, I want to say thank you for the very warm and kind comments you made on my BookTube newbie tag. It's great to feel welcomed into the BookTube community. I had an okay reading week, not a fabulous reading week, but an okay reading week. I was distracted by some of the things that are going on in my professional research. I'm being very distracted by some tangents, and I need to get myself away from the very interesting tangents and focus on the primary task and not let myself dive into the fabulousness that is tangents as procrastination. But an okay reading week. I went through a couple of poetry collections, neither of which have stuck greatly with me. I think they are okay collections, one by Billy Ray Belcourt and one by Mary Oliver, but neither one of them made a fabulous impression on me. I think that says more about my rustiness as a reader of poetry than it does about either of the collections. I also, on a happier note, finished my first title for Victober. I finished Mary Seacole's The Wonderful Travels of Mary Seacole, an 1857 memoir of her time spent in the Crimea. It's an odd little book. It's not a difficult read. It's not particularly long or particularly challenging even. Its tone is odd. I think I was expecting something slightly more military in focus, slightly more martial in tone, and it's not that way at all. It's oddly comic for a memoir about wartime experience. Odd little book. Tonally, it reminded me in a strange way of some of Thackeray's work, some of, say, Vanity Fair. So an odd little book. Worth having read, though, for a different perspective on Victorian military campaigns. And I think if you are a fan of Pratchett and if you like Monstrous Regiment, you would enjoy reading Mary Seacole's account of the Crimea War. Let's see, what else did I work through this week? Jeanette Winterson's Frankenstein, which has been all over BookTube and the literary press. I enjoyed this. I've read a couple of retellings of the Shelley, Wollstonecraft, Godwin, and Byron circle, and so that was an okay book. Probably not the best book I've read this year. It has two narrative lines and it alternates back and forth between a telling of Mary Shelley's life from basically the moment she left her father's home to a little bit after her husband's death. And then that is counterbalanced by a retelling of all of the story recast into the 21st century. So all of the characters in the 19th century story, whether they're actual human beings we have living, we actually have records from. So Shelley, Godwin's, Wollstonecraft, all of Byron, all of those folks are recast into 21st century characters, all with slightly parodic names to help you line up who's been reworked as who. So it's an interesting and amusing device. I'm not sure how entirely successful it is. The thing I'm still mulling over and trying to figure out is, did I miss the 21st century version of Percy Shelley? Or is he deliberately absent from that account of the book? And I'm not sure. And I suspect my reading of it would have been enriched by reading Mary Shelley's The Last Man, which I haven't read. So an interesting work, some parodies, some pastiche, some rethinking about gender issues, technology issues. Worth the read. Not something that's going to be on my I want to reread this sooner rather than later pile of books. I just finished this morning something that is on my I want to reread this very quickly. I have read Leila Lalame's The Other Americans, and it was great. It tells the story of a family and small social groups in the aftermath of a hit-and-run accident when Driss, the father of the family, has been killed in a hit-and-run outside his restaurant in the American West, and his daughters and widow have to come to terms with this. So it starts out with the kind of tone and shape of maybe this is going to be a little bit like a detective novel. There's actually a detective character and a police character. It shifts from that very quickly, but in the process of shifting, I mean, there's all this kind of laying down of some red herrings, and it's quite interesting about how she moves away from that so very quickly. It's a novel that's told from maybe a dozen characters' perspectives, many short chapters, and as you're reading, it's a little bit difficult to tell, okay, where are we actually anchored in time? How close to the moment of that hit and run are we? Or are the characters who are talking about the hit and run, the investigation of the hit and run, the impact of the death on them and the family? I think this is actually quite a fine novel. I learned after I finished it that it's been nominated for the U.S. National Book Prize. That doesn't surprise me. I think it's a great novel, and I think it's one of those novels that would repay rereading. It's quite subtle. It's got all of these very hot topics that it talks about: race, Islamophobia, gender issues, problematic policing, marriage, sibling rivalry, all of these complex emotional issues that could have become very didactic, and it's not a didactic novel at all. It's very skillfully done, and I would recommend it highly. What else do I have here? I think that's it for reading this week. I did go off to the biennial book sale that's held here twice a year. It's a charity book sale, and I was fairly restrained. I managed to get about a dozen books quite inexpensively. For that I was very grateful. A mix of things that I've read already and a stack of things that I'm hoping to read in the future. Coming up this week, I want to get my research a little bit more focused and on track, but in terms of pleasure reading, I'm hoping to tackle Canadian Crusoes as my second Victober title. I have a little short history that's not really connected to anything but personal curiosity. It's called Dangerous Enemy Sympathizers. It's about the internment camps in Canada, places where Canadian citizens, Jewish refugees, Canadian German citizens ended up during the war, the Second World War. So I'm curious about that. People don't talk about that part of Canadian history very much. Also, this one I'm probably going to tackle today or tomorrow, Lynn Cody's latest novel, Watching You Without Me. I'm quite curious about this. I enjoy Cody's novels a great deal. The other one that I've started and haven't made much headway in yet is Cherie Demeline's Empire of the Wild. You might know her name from last year. She had a big hit in Canada with Marrow Thieves, which is a dystopian novel set in the north of Canada, which is quite well done. She's an Indigenous writer, and her book tackles indigeneity and the kinds of issues that circle around that. So I'm looking forward to that, and I have dipped into the Notorious Duck book, but I haven't gotten very far with it yet, so I'm hoping to kind of get more than 50 pages into it. Not sure what I think of it yet, but I'm going to give it a try. So that's it for me this morning. Thank you very much for watching if you made it to the end of this kind of rambling wrap-up, and I hope you have a fabulous reading week. Bye-bye.